Hey gang, welcome back to quick tip number 6 in the series. For those of you who are new to the channel or new to the quick tip series, I basically recorded this video over a year ago for my Patreon. This one is still quite raw. They eventually get much more refined and polished, so please forgive kind of the very low quality of this tutorial, but the information still stands, I feel. This one's on loaded brush blending. Admittedly, this isn't a technique that I do constantly, although I do utilize it in certain situations. I kind of go through and explain it in the video, but I just want to point out that 1, this video was recorded over a year ago. 2, it's exclusive to my Patreon for an entire year. And then now I'm slowly starting to release these. So I actually just recorded quick tip number 55 this afternoon. So you can see I literally release a new one every week. Anyhow, if you enjoy the video, trust me, the content's going to get better as these go on because I put a little bit more effort into these when I first started doing them. Wasn't quite sure or didn't realize how popular they were going to be on my Patreon, so I kind of just hit the record button and went to town without any edits or anything. That's the whole premise behind the quick tip, that I don't have to do any editing to it. So take that in mind while watching this video. I promise the content will get a little more detail-oriented and precise in the coming quick tips. But if you enjoyed this, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. I do a lot of stuff here on the channel, product reviews, other tutorials, etc. So check it out. And if you don't know, I also stream live on Twitch 3 nights a week. I'm not going to say the schedule now because who knows when you're watching this. My schedule could have changed. But this is my full-time job. This is what I do for a living. So check out my links down below. You can check out my Patreon and my Twitch channel as well. And I hope you enjoy the tutorial. Thanks for watching. Alright guys, for this week I'm going to show you basically loaded brush blending, but I'm not going to dwell too long on it. Really what I like to use loaded brush blending for, you don't see me do it a ton, but if I'm trying to get a blend into a tighter area, say like I really want to blend in this little area here and fade it out. That might be a little too tight back in there, but that's still a really good candidate for it. Or anything really skinny, like say this stretch of cape here. It's really easy to achieve it in there because you're essentially loading a ton of your highlight towards the back portion of the brush. And then the very tip of it, you're going to have the shadow, okay? So you're going to start with your dark up here and you're going to fade out into your highlight. But for the sake of the demo and the sake of visibility, I'm going to perform it back on this gray section of this cloak, okay? The one thing that we're going to talk about is, I've talked while I'm live on stream many times about keeping your brush moistened, okay? So what you're going to want to do is you're going to take a pre-moistened paper towel. It's not going to be like soaking wet like a glaze. Like this is wet enough I could wring it out because I've been glazing all stream, but it's not dripping wet. But you dip your brush in, right, and it's nice and saturated. I could literally take and drop droplets onto my onto my work surface. But I essentially, as if I'm just kind of like cleaning my brush off, right? There's plenty of water on this brush, and I'm not gonna mash it in, much like I'm glazing. I'm just gonna kind of remove some of that extra moisture. That brush is still very, very saturated with liquid, right? Now these paints are completely unthinned, okay? So this is a really tricky portion or part of the technique. But you want to load the highlight color first. Now I'm not trying to get this paint all up in my ferrule, but I'm also not going to worry too much if it does get in there. I essentially want to load up this portion of my brush, okay? Like leave the front quarter of the brush bare. Some of that paint will wick in because of capillary action, because of moisture in the brush right now. So it will kind of mix in. Don't panic, that's fine. But you're essentially filling the first or the second quarter to half of the brush, or third quarter of the brush, with the highlight color, while your bristles are really nice and moist. If you look, there's quite a bit of water on this still, right? Okay, so it's important that we get that moisture down so that the brush has enough moisture in it. And then here's how I load this brush, right? I kind of just soak it up however I need to do it. I get it in there, and it is a considerable amount of paint, right? I'm not too concerned about it, but if I got too much, this is how I'm going to get rid of it. Now, I'm not applying pressure to that brush because it'll kind of like wick that loaded highlight. I don't know why I was going to say pre-shade. But then I'll take and I'll roll the very edge slightly into the shadow color. And you can add more of the shadow color depending on how extreme you want this to go. But the idea is that this paint is going to push that shadow color out and transition and create your blend for you by pushing it out. That's why it's so important that this brush stays moist, so that that back moisture can then push the highlight color out. So I'll kind of zoom in a little bit here, and we'll get this in action. It's so important that you get this mixture right, but then you essentially just start your blend, right? And as you move, that color will push itself out, and you'll get your highlight comes out, and that's a loaded brush blender right there. It's very easy to achieve once you understand how that moisture works. I might even have too much moisture. See how thin that is? But if I want to go and do this in a tighter area, all I'm going to do is reload my brush here, but I'm going to take even less paint than before. I might even do something like this, where I kind of create a small run of paint right here, like this, right? And then I clean my brush. Oh, that's, you guys can't see it. So maybe I create a small run of paint like this, like a thin run, but I'm going to kind of mound up a little bit of paint there, right? And then I come back in with my moist bristles, my moist bristles, and I gather this paint in the brush like so, and then I grab a very light amount of my shadow color, and this might be a little too much, but we'll try and do the blend right here just for the sake of demonstration purposes. You see it kind of transitioning to that green now. Now I've got that nice shadow transition coming in. Again, too much moisture on my brush. I'm using a synthetic. I usually use a sable brush, but I've been blending more with this synthetic just to get smoother blends. So let's try it with a little less moisture. I still want to have enough back moisture in there, but I'm going to kind of run it through my mouth. And let's get our highlight color built in there, and our shadow color, and I don't know, let's do it right here. Can you guys see that? Yeah, okay. So I start working this color, working this color, working this color, until I start seeing that green come out. And that's a little too much of the shadow, but you can still see the blend working there. So you guys get the idea of what's going on. We're kind of, essentially, think of it as like a syringe, okay? I know this is a weird analogy, but think of it as a syringe. The color that's loaded into the brush on top is going to push what's right at the front of the brush down and out. Essentially, the plunger is pushing the paint this way, right? So let's come up here. I'll just do it on the sword just because the sword is a nice flat surface, okay? So we start running our shadow in here and then start pulling down, and that capillary action is going to start bringing your highlight in, okay? So now I've got it nice and dark here. Come on. Nice and dark up here towards the hilt, but it's transitioning out. And you can do this, you don't have to load the highlight color first. You can load the shadow color in the back and work into your highlight. So here we go. And let's say I'm more comfortable blending this way, so I'll start with my highlight and start pulling it up, and you'll see that shadow start coming out. And there it is. And it's transitioning into that shadow. There's no right or wrong on what you load first. It's just a matter of comfortability. Did I really just say comfortability? And this will really help you kind of get your blends in place when you're doing base work. Maybe I just want a very stark little bit of highlight and a ton of shadow, right? So I'll load up my brush a little higher with that highlight color, and I'll really kind of front load this shadow color considerably. Now it's almost like a 20, let's say a 60-40 mix, if you will. 60% black green and 40% light green. And it'll take a lot more time to kind of get that transition right. A considerable amount of more time. It's going to take you a lot of brush work to get that highlight to finally come out, because you've got so much of that shadow that eventually it'll come out. That was probably not even enough right there. Let's try it over here. See, it's just starting to come out there. But you get the point. You can load up the brush. You're going to have to experiment with it. But that's essentially how you do a loaded brush. That first transition here is a really nice transition. I'm going to go ahead and do a second coat over it, because a lot of times, like with regular wet blending, we really got to kind of concentrate on disciplining ourselves that, hey, this is not a finishing technique per se. It's more or less a base coat technique. So we start out with our dark green, and then we come out to our highlight color. And I'm still kind of keeping that brush angle, much like if I were regular wet blending here, like on a plastic card real quick for you. Much like if I'm wet blending, just a normal wet blend, I'm trying to keep the angle of the brush, I don't know. I'm not going to give you a degree because I don't feel like that's fair. But keeping your brush kind of flat to the model the best you can will help you get a better blend. You see that highlight color kind of pushing it out. So there you go. That's loaded brush blending for you. Hope you guys enjoyed that quick tip. Oh, and thank you again very much for being patrons.